I brought up Caleb Johnson at the combine. They didn't really have anybody test all that. Their combine numbers. Now, I'm not a combine guy. I'm not really a draft guy either. But I did graze somebody's basically notes from Iowa's combine guys. I mean, again, I don't know what past Iowa guys have tested out. Maybe they all test low. But these were some horrific numbers. Let's call a spade and be objective, Mark. These were horrific numbers. But we can talk about it.
I was unaware of how Iowa tested, so you're bringing new information to me. I have been the guy up until a couple of years ago that I would turn on the combine day one, whenever it started, 9 a.m. in the morning. Boom, my TV's going on at 8:59, and I'm watching the combine start to finish. Barring other better things to do, but basically the combine's going to be on at my house the whole time.
Okay, so
I didn't turn on the combine. I know very little about what happened at the combine.
Yeah, I don't want to sit there and watch the complete. That just seems almost torturous to me. So I'm glad
I used to love it.
I'm glad that you love that, but I'd rather run the combine in Madden than watch it in real life. So here's what I'll say. Let me read you this is credit to Tyler Tashman, Des Moines Register. Tyler, great guy, doing a great job on the beat, so to speak. But this is how Iowa tested out. And should I just share my screen here, Mark?
Sure.
I'm giving due credit to Tyler for tabulating this and piecing it all together. So if you want to check this out, I don't often plug other people's work except our friends over at Hawkeye Report, but Tyler did a good job with this, so certainly go over there. But here are some of the results, and as you can see, he lays this out. Basically, the prospect grades it's a sliding scale of how this is how they're rated. 8 is a perfect prospect, 7.3 to 0.5, perennial All-Pro, projected as a perennial All-Pro, 7 to 7.1, potential Pro Bowl talent, 6.7 to 6.9, year one starter. Then you get down 6.5, 6.6, a boom or bust potential, 6.4, 6.49, will become a good starter within a couple of years. 6.3 to 6.39 will eventually be a plus starter. 6.2 to 6.29 will eventually be an average starter, and so forth. So Ashton Jeanty earned a 7.15. He's the highest player in the entire draft class. So I'm not saying he's going to end up being a better player than will be Caleb Johnson. However, I think it's hard to deny that. Let's get off of you don't want to talk about women's basketball. I think it's hard to deny the athleticism and the numbers there. So for context, he scored a 7.15. Then you start looking at Iowa guys. Caleb Johnson had a 6.23. Now let's go back up to the sliding scale here. 6.23 is lower half of this. He's the highest rated guy that tested at Iowa, but will eventually be an average starter eventually. So if we're talking about a guy who's going to get drafted in the first 2 rounds, I don't think, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, they're not drafting running backs that are projected to eventually be an average starter.
No.
Right? So that tells me he's not just on combine results. This is just combine results. But if we're just looking at combine results, that tells me he is not a top 2, maybe even 3 round running back. Lance Zierlein, who's written NFL stuff for a long time, analyst at NFL.com, comment. These were excellent comments, by the way. I love that Tyler includes Lance Zierlein, because I thought he described Caleb's game beautifully. He's built like a bruiser. His style is more finesse, prefers to win with tempo and decisiveness, keeps his runs on time, on track, while allowing blockers to do their job. So he's developed patience. He's not overly aggressive, has the same size and strength to break tackles and grab extra yards at the finish, runs with below average creativity and cut quickness, but has consistent linear play speed to pop chunk runs. He can catch, but his 3-down value takes a hit because of his struggles in pass pro. His traits and running style make him a projectable fit in a 2-back system with the upside to take on a bigger chunk down the road. He ran a 4.57, good for 19th out of 24 running backs tested.
Doesn't that surprise you?
That's not good.
I thought he was
That's
faster than that.
that is not good. Well, here's the deal. He's faster. I think he'd win more 60-yard dashes,
Yes, I was just going to say.
but
Takes him a
he's
while to get
not.
going.
He's yes, exactly right. And the 40-yard dash, at least we view that as a big part of the combine, right? Especially for skill guys, running backs. So, I mean, you look at that. That doesn't make me think positively about Caleb Johnson's draft stock based on combine performance. Correct?
No, he has some nice things to say about his game, though, on the field on game day.
Yeah, but I also think he's spot on with how he describes this. I've been getting knocked for 3 years because I've talked about how he looks the part, but he doesn't play as physical as he looks. Now he got better doing that this year, but there's still, I mean, a guy like Lance Zierlein, who I respect, it still sees that might be a bit of a hole. And you're also playing against a lot bigger people and a lot more athletic bodies in the NFL. So there's that. He's the highest performer at the combine. Now think about that. Sebastian Castro, projected grade under a 6, 5.95. We thought maybe he'd leave early last year. He's projected to be an average backup or special teamer. Average backup. That might, again, maybe these other Iowa guys have been graded similarly, but that's unbelievable to me.
Based on combine results. My one
Based on
question, and you
combine
can't
results,
answer
yes.
this, would be if we take that formula of all those, which is very specific. It's not like there's 3 categories like great,
Right.
good, and
Right,
awful.
exactly.
Like it's very specific. Like how accurate has that been in the past?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. I don't know if you go through past Iowa draft classes where all these guys rated really low from combine results. That's possible. I wouldn't think so given the. I mean, I wouldn't think so given the strength and conditioning program through much of Kirk Ferentz's tenure. But at the same time, sometimes guys play better than they test. I don't know. I can tell you. Look at his 40-yard dash time. It was
Yeah.
the worst out of 15 safeties. He was dead last. 4.59, dead last. His vertical jump, 30.5, dead last. I'm not trying to be hard on the guy. I'm just saying,
No.
Mark, this is the second highest rated kid that from Iowa that went to the combine, and he was the worst safety graded. That's profound. Again, maybe it won't be. And listen, if we're wrong on this, if this is not a true indication of draftability, then these guys will be drafted lower, and some of these guys won't be drafted. If it's not that much of an indicator, if history tells a different story, then this won't affect things. He'll still be. I think Castro will be a 4 to 5 round pick. Caleb will be a 2nd to 3rd round pick. But I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not in the business, but those numbers, again, go back up to Caleb Johnson. Really bad as far as 40-yard dash. 19 out of 24 as far as his ranking. Sebastian Castro, 15 out of 15 on both of those tests. Luke Lachey, prospect grade of 5.94, also an average backup, projected as be an average backup or special teamer. Likely to be fighting for a role as a tight end 3 or 4. Has NFL size, but he needs to prove he can consistently sustain as a run blocker in order to become a trustworthy 3-down player. Again, that is not a typical Iowa tight end. We're used to Iowa tight ends, whether Michigan wants to claim them or not. Eric All, Sam Laporta, even Noah Fant, TJ Hawkinson, George Kittle, guys going to the league and playing almost immediately. I mean, Sam Laporta is a perfect example of that. But they're not fighting for tight end. That is like Henry Krieger Coble stuff and Sean Byer stuff for the Broncos. I'm serious. I mean, I hope that's not true. I'm just telling you. So, anyways, that's where he's at. Then you look at his numbers. Ooh, good vertical jump. How much that means as a tight end, I don't know. As far as being a red zone target, that's probably a good metric. But 3-cone drill, 5th out of 8 tight ends tested. 20-yard shuttle, 9th out of 9 tight ends tested. Those grades don't seem great, do they, Mark?
No, they
Okay.
don't.
Then we'll go down to Jamari Harris,
We did not get a
5.92.
40 time. I'm sorry, we did not get
No,
a 40 time on Laporta or on Lachey.
I'm gonna say no, and I don't know that he ran the 40.
Okay.
Let me look just real quick if I can see.
He probably
Um,
didn't if they
he
didn't
did not
post it
run the
there.
40. Did not run the 40.
I will say one thing before you continue, Corey, that in watching the NFL Network's presentation of the combine, they typically show, and they just basically repeat the same graphic every year. I don't know if they did this year, that will show the best wide receivers in the NFL and where they slotted on their 40 times. They weren't the worst. So you don't want to finish 15th out of 15 or whatever else we saw there that was low down the ranks, but they weren't the best either. Like the very best wide receivers in the NFL and some of the great wide receivers over the last 15 years or so have typically been like average in regards to speed in the 40.
Well, okay. Well, yeah, he didn't run the 40. But again, those other numbers, vertical jump, solid. Sell yourself on that. But the rest of the numbers are pretty average at best. Jamari Harris, graded as a 5.92, also projected to be an average backup or special teamer. Talked about how he majored in zone coverages at Iowa, has good instinctive eyes and ball skills. When healthy, he's been a quality starter, but his age and perception, he's a zone only corner, could work against him. Vertical jump was good for him as well. 6th out of 22 cornerbacks. So those two guys tested well in that regard. Broad jump, 16th out of 21 cornerbacks. That's obviously not a good rating unless there's just a lot of really athletic corners in this class. YA Black, if I believe, don't quote me on this, we'll go back. This one was really, really, really scary. Okay. Really scary, Mark. And I'm not surprised by this, but here's a guy who, he may end up making his money in the league just being he's going to be a space clogger, but he got a prospect grade of 5.86. But listen to Lance Zierlein's analysis. Massive nose tackle with high-end traits. Black's run plugging can run hot and cold as he fails to anchor with flat feet sunk deep into the ground when attacked on an angle. He can separate and neutralize the block to messy the gap when his pad level is right and he's one-on-one. Black lacks snap quickness and range, so he's much more a space eater than a playmaker. Size and traits will be coveted. Black lacks rush and is a little inconsistent at controlling the point. He might have a ceiling as a rotational big man. Listen to these numbers, though, Mark. Wow. 40-yard dash. Why did he run the 40-yard dash? 19th out of 19 defensive tackles, 5.39. Vertical, 26th out of 28, 25.5. Three-cone drill, 7.63 seconds, 5th out of 8. Those are some really not favorable numbers, right? I mean, and maybe it's, I know DT can defensive tackle can kind of be a different type of position because there's some guys that are more of your interior pass rushers. He's a space clogger. I'm sure Vince Wilfork didn't test well at the combine back in his day, but nevertheless, I would almost like to not go to the combine. Maybe that's stupid. Maybe that's the wrong attitude. I'm sure if you go to the combine, it helps you. And then Jay Higgins, wow, this might have been the most surprising one of all. Prospect grade, 5.68, candidate for bottom of roster or practice squad. That's his projection. That's Jay Higgins' projection.
Yeah.
He's racked up tackles at Iowa and awards, built like a downhill running back, delivers power behind his pads like one. Instincts feed his gaudy production, but a lack of length and twitch lead him to getting stuck on blocks when he's not playing downhill. He lacks change of direction and quickness and isn't fast enough to capture outside runners. Higgins shouldn't be asked to handle man coverage as a pro, but he's above average as a zone defender. He has 3-down talent and coverage value, but his limitations create small margins for error and large obstacles to overcome. A 40-yard dash, 4.82, which is the worst rating of any linebacker. 16 linebackers were tested, 16 out of 16. Broad jump, 9.2. That's dead last of all linebackers tested, 15 out of 15. Now, somehow he won the 3-cone drill. He was best 3-cone guy, and The entire group, only 7 linebackers ran it, but he was number 1, Mark.
Now, if you just grabbed randomly a bunch of dudes off the street and said, we're going to do these various athletic tests, and one was the 40-yard dash and one was the 3-cone drill, you would think that there would be some
similarities there,
yeah,
correlations.
I know it's not running in a straight line, but there's quickness involved. And if you're fast, you're usually quick and vice versa. I would just, that's kind of strange.
By the way, I don't relish in any of these numbers, but just purely as a common guy's analysis, I find it fascinating. It's fascinating
Mm-hmm.
because all year we've talked about this past year we talked about how underwhelming Iowa was on defense.
Mm-hmm.
Like it seems like the sum of their parts are lesser than or are less than the individuals, the pieces, and I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I think this is all going to bear itself out in the draft. I don't think NFL teams are stupid. I think scouts are very smart. These guys were invited to the combine for a reason. I'll acknowledge that. But I have been saying for the last couple of months, I think they may have close to a record number of guys drafted. I don't know. And if they're all drafted 6th, 7th round, maybe they get a bunch of Hawkeyes drafted late in the draft. How do you weigh that? Like, okay, decent talent there, but nobody great. I mean, Caleb Johnson's a great college running back. Nobody's going to deny that. At least this past year he was. But those numbers, look what Ashton Genty did. I mean, it's apples to oranges to some extent. By the way, Connor Colby, prospect grade 5.65, another candidate for bottom of roster or practice squad. 4-year starter who can play guard in a primarily move-oriented rushing attack. Listen to this. This is indicting, Mark. Listen to this description. Colby started 50 games at Iowa, is well-versed in the inside-outside zone attack. He reads defensive movements and adjusts his blocks accordingly. He connects with strong hands, looks to finish lateral engagements, does not have the pad level to play strength to deal with power across from him. His pass protection is troubling. His pass protection is troubling with areas of concern that might not be correctable. That is very strong language from a draft analyst.
You know what this causes me to want to do? It's too time consuming, but to say, okay, what were the most successful offensive plays against the Iowa defense this year? And just watch Jay Higgins on every play, every running play that gashed them, et cetera, et cetera. Then take every drop back during Connor Colby's 50 games at Iowa, every drop back, and watch, just isolate on him and see.
But what's interesting, we said that all year, Mark. We were like, man, this offensive line has really come a long way, but man, they're still giving up a lot of pressure to Cade and Brendan. I mean, they did. They did. This is supposed to be their best. He and Logan Jones were their two best. I think that both guys were considered to be better offensive linemen over playing different positions than Mason Richmond, but those were your top 3. And Connor Colby considered to be the best NFL prospect, and he was just rated as having pass protection that is troubling. So anyways, and that's, I believe, it. So thank you, Tyler Tashman, for those. That's I appreciate him compiling all that. I just thought we could talk about that. I'm sure we'll end up talking about it again as we get closer to the draft. But yeah, I'm gonna run. I guess I'll run through those probably on my channel and just do the same thing we just did. And I don't know. I react to it, I guess. But yeah, it would be an interesting exercise to pull up some of those analyses from past seasons, past draft classes from Iowa players, and see if was George Kittle in those with those same descriptors, and T.J. Hawkinson and Josie Jewell, who's turned into a solid NFL player. Christian Kirksey. I mean, that's what's crazy too about this, Mark. We're talking guys at positions that historically have performed very well in the league. Okay. This isn't an Iowa quarterback that, he started to emerge, but he still didn't test well at the combine. No, these are tight ends, linebackers, cornerbacks, offensive linemen, and defensive linemen that are testing, looks to be poorly. Hey, their highest rated combine guy was a running back. When's the last time we've said that? I don't know what Sean Green did at the 09 combine, but yeah, it's interesting.
It is. I'm interested in, again, that grading scale must mean something, or somebody at some point would pitch it, I would hope.
Or at least pitch it for, I mean, you can't pitch it just for Iowa, I guess, but it's, yeah. Maybe they do. Maybe for Iowa, it's not as important, but I can't.
Just
I
like
just,
recruiting.
yeah, just to some extent, right? Yeah. Uh, that's why, I mean, you can look at this two sides of the card, right? On one side, you're like, okay, maybe they weren't as talented as we thought they were. That's concerning, but who cares? Like, for the players, I want what's best for the guys, get drafted and have success, all that. But doesn't that maybe make us a little more optimistic about next year? Because maybe they're not losing as much, or is it troubling that those guys were so much better than the guys below them? I don't know
Yeah.
how you're. I don't know how you're. I do know this. They brought in two interior guys on the defensive side. Bryce Hawthorne's looked really good so far, is what I've been told. They brought in Jonah Pace from Central Michigan. They have not brought in a linebacker. By the way, Nick Jackson was snubbed. He was a guy that I would have expected to end up at the combine. Did not get an invite, so that's notable. But corner is an intriguing one because they bring a lot of guys back, a couple of young prospects that I think could develop into immediate starters. A guy like Jalen Watson's one guy example there. And then Quinn Schulte didn't get invited to the combine, but he never was going to. I think he was a really good college player, but was just never going to test well. Maybe he'll get a camp invite somewhere, but you do bring back Xavier Wampa. You bring back a couple of guys on the outside of that defensive line. And I don't think anybody's going to deny, though, that Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson were really good in college. I do wonder, I think, and this is not a personal attack. I've gotten backlash because I've said some things about certain people that people think is personal. This is not a personal attack. I think Y.A. Black was a little overrated, but I'm no scout. I'm no analyst. He is a space clogger. I don't know how great of a football player he is. And what I read with Lance Zierlein, we'll see what the NFL thinks of him. But those combine numbers don't surprise me from that respect. But at the same time, throughout all this, I've been thinking, well, maybe I'm just not seeing things right. When I watch Y.A. Black play, I'm not impressed. I'm just not. He's huge. He is a mammoth, Mark. He is an absolute mammoth. I've stood next to him. He's one of the biggest guys I've ever stood next to in an Iowa Hawkeye uniform. I wondered if he was a little overrated. Jamari, I don't think, showed many chinks this year, but part of the knock against him is his age, as is the case with Sebastian Castro. I'm surprised Castro tested out as poorly as he did. Now, he's a big hitter and a hard worker, so those guys are going to get chances. I'm sure Sebastian Castro will be drafted somewhere. And even, again, most of these guys, it's not like the NBA. If you don't get drafted, you still got a chance to work yourself into a camp. Yes, it's harder to do and earn a spot, but they'll still get at least probably close to 10 guys in camps, between guys that get drafted and the guys that get unsigned or go unsigned as free agents. So interesting stuff. I have not really followed the combine well enough to be some sort of authority, but I just thought those results were intriguing.
Well, we went into the season, of course, looking at the linebacking in particular and also the secondary as top 3 to 5 units in the country. And we were not alone in that. That was pretty much the consensus across the board from the experts, is that this is one of the best, maybe the best linebacking unit, at least from the standpoint of productivity coming back. Probably, if that's the measurement, the best linebacking unit in the country. I remember when we had the conversation, I threw the athleticism component into it and said I would back them off a little bit because of that. And maybe that's played out with the invite not coming to Nick Jackson and Jay Higgins not testing well. But then the secondary, again, a top 3 to 5 unit in the country, and the defensive line not being elite, maybe, but being very good. And that this defense, from looking at the productivity and the rankings of this defense and how dominant they've been prior to 2024, And then you take the offensive upgrade where they actually took pressure off the defense because they actually had a pulse this year, and that the defense regressed as much as it did with the veteran leadership and productivity coming back, minus Cooper DeJean. And who else did they lose off that 23 defense? Anyone else significant?
23. Was Riley Moss was
The year
Moss?
before?
No, I think Moss was.
Oh, he was.
I think he was 23, wasn't he?
So yeah, so two significant players, of course, and
I
maybe,
don't know.
but anyway, regardless, that they didn't lose much, that we were expecting dominant defense this year.
Yeah. But again, based on the performance on the field throughout much of this past season, those numbers shouldn't surprise us.